Welcome to the S1 Arabian VACC seminar session for the S1, specifically Dubai Tier 1. Um, S1 covers delivery as well as ground in the aerodrome air traffic control position. Um, so this session is going to be pretty in-depth as far as the theory stuff is concerned. It's going to cover all kinds of things such as procedures within UAE, some examples. Again, it's mostly going to be theory based. I'll try and be as applicable and uh, sort of interactive as much as I can with my teaching style, but it's mostly going to be theory based. That being said, you can have Euroscope open in the background if you'd like and follow along, or just whatever helps. I will cover as much as I can in the time that we have, which I'm looking to hopefully keep this below 2 hours. So yeah, as mentioned, those that have good attendance here, bar maybe some minor disconnects and reconnects, um, your theory session, as per your training plan, will be marked as complete. So you can benefit from the session. Of course, those that are not able to attend the whole thing, you can also benefit from the recordings, which we've just talked about. So if everyone's happy, I'd just like the thumbs up from everyone. We've got 7 of you, I think. 10 of you, sorry. Um, and I can officially begin. And I'll say this again regarding the questions. I'm sure everyone's going to have questions, but try and keep the questions um, at a minimum until I say, hey, any questions? At that point, bring them up. So, all right, a little bit more about myself before we start. I'm a mentor for the VACC. I'm also part of the VATMINA staff team, and I'm accompanied by Rashid here. He's the deputy ATC training director for the VACC, and he's going to make sure that you guys are behaving in chat. And he's overlooking some other things as well. But yeah, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think 3 of them voted. And I'll take that as a yes. I think that's a good time to start. Okay. I will share screen now. Hopefully this is visible. I'd just like to see if all of you guys can see it. You might see me tabbing to Discord every now and again. Okay, it's visible. Cool. Okay, so let's start with the fundamentals. So what are we doing here? We are controlling on VATSIM. Maybe you've flown on VATSIM before. Maybe you've already tried to control before. Maybe this is your first time even thinking about air traffic control. Regardless, what you need to know about is we are connecting to the VATSIM network as a virtual controller, and to the restrictions of as per the restrictions of our rating, we will be doing aerodrome control, particularly delivery as well as ground. And we use various software. Some of them stand alone, some of them interact with other software. Regardless, the entire suite of programs that we use is all to interact with the VATSIM network, to interact with flight plans, and for you to be able to interact with VATSIM itself. So obviously that requires some understanding of how all of it works. You need to know how to use your tools. You need to know how to be able to interact. And for that, this comprehensive seminar shall hopefully cover enough for you to be able to try and jump in a sweatbox with one of the mentors and see how you progress. To aid with the training, of course, we have theory sessions like these, but primarily the source of information comes from this document right here. This is the Arabian VACC Aerodrome Standard Operating Procedure. There's one for each aerodrome, as the name suggests, and this one in particular is for Dubai. It's been revised as of May 2021, and it's valid from here. So this document should have about 99% of whatever is needed to control on the VATSIM network. That 1% comes from some things that just pan out a little bit differently. I'm hoping that maybe my theory would cover a 0.5 of that, but but really I can't account for everything because at the end of the day, the human factor and things just pan out differently in the real world sometimes. At the end of the day, this should give you the confidence that you need to be able to control. This covers everything pretty much when it comes to the procedures at Dubai as an aerodrome controller, as it says here. The general operating procedures for Dubai International Airport. It does supplement other documents. This doesn't apply to delivery and ground for the time being, so you don't have to worry about that one too much. And same here. Some other options that might be important to you, you can come down to, so first of all, where do you find it? So if you come down to each sort of area is split into different channels. If we come down to the UAE, if you come to, sorry, this is the voice channels. I should come up here. Hang on. ATC operations. There we go. So in the UAE resources channel, you'll find pretty much everything you need, and the SOP is found in the aerodrome specific documentation for Dubai. That's the one. Some other resources that might be useful would be the radio telephony manual. This is a manual that covers a lot of the phraseology for how you speak as an air traffic controller. Now, chances are, if you're a VATSIM pilot, you already have a good idea of what happens in there. But if you just like to brush up something, or if you just like to have more discipline, which is something again I'll talk about as we dive into phraseology and things like that, it all comes back to this document regarding your phraseology, radio telephony manual, or RTM. And as I said, there are some supplementary documents as well, such as the MATS wake stuff. But yeah, all right. What about controlling on the network? So we use a program known as Euroscope. It's a 32-bit program. And Euroscope is what allows us to see the planes, see the aircraft, see the flight plans. That's how we interact. Euroscope itself is supplemented by some other programs. One is Audio for VATSIM, which is this one. This allows you to tune frequencies on the VATSIM audio codec, and it should work seamlessly with Euroscope, provided everything is running smoothly. So if you're connected as a delivery controller on Euroscope, and if you hit connect on Audio for VATSIM, provided you have everything set up correctly, it should be able to talk to each other, and it will automatically prime up the correct frequencies with the correct, microphone ranges and everything like that. So that's Audio for VATSIM. We have vATIS as well. This is a client that we use to connect an ATIS frequency for any airport. For this, we have, so now I'll talk about sector files and ATIS files. So Euroscope alone is just the software that we use. However, for Euroscope to know where we're controlling, we have to give it a sector file to open. Sector file is a file that defines pretty much the area that we will be controlling in. And that can be found, as it says here in sector file and vATIS profiles. There's a download link for this that takes you to this website. And you can just go ahead and grab the install right there. And it should look something like this. So I've created a folder for sector files, and it'll come in a zip file, and once you extract it, it should put this here in a folder like this, and inside the folder you'll have something that looks like this. You'll have subfolders that have all the resources that Euroscope needs to read everything correctly. In addition to that, we have the actual individual files that Euroscope will open on your screen. So the way you open it is pretty much left-clicking Euroscope, and you will be prompted with this. You just navigate to that directory where you've downloaded it, and you just click on whichever sector file you wish to open. We are going to be doing Aerodrome, and we're going to be doing Dubai as per the training session. We just left-click on Dubai, and it will greet you with a very wonderful, infamous startup noise, which I have changed. So it might appear a little bit different, but you just double-click it, wait for it to boot up, just give it a second, and any moment, you should be greeted with the Aerodrome. There it is. Okay. Any prompt messages that come up, you can just go ahead and close them. So, right, how did I get this running? Well, the sector file, you essentially, so Euroscope can be found online, Euroscope install. And you just go to the website that Euroscope is uploaded. And you just get the latest version, In addition to that, you grab the latest sector file. And if you do things correctly, as I just said, this should work. Some other issues that I've seen, sometimes the fonts don't load correctly. That used to happen in the previous versions of Euroscope. I don't think that happens nowadays, because everything is much more integrated now with beta files and everything, not really necessarily causing any issues. But yeah, this is how it should look like. It's got a certain font. You should see stuff, and we'll talk about the controls and interaction in a second. Um, but yeah, this is pretty much what it should look like. In fact, I'll do something better, actually. I will open my training sector file. This is the sector file that I use to conduct training sessions. The reason for this is because this one is pretty much untouched. It's what it would look like out of the box. The reason I'm saying that is because you can configure your sector file to your liking. You can move panels around, and Euroscope can remember where you've kept something. So this is probably the best representation of what it would look like out of the box. Obviously, as per your workflow, you can move things around. You can tinker with it if you had to, but this is probably what a clean sector file should look like for you. In addition to this, obviously, you have audio for VATSIM, as I mentioned, and vATIS. I'm just going to quickly look at chat, just in case. And you have vATIS, and yeah, this is pretty much how you get everything up and running. And if you wish to connect, there's a big connect button up there. You left-click it, and the drop-down will yield all kinds of call signs that you could connect with. So if you're connecting as Dubai delivery, you take Dubai delivery. If you're connecting as Dubai ground, you take Dubai ground. And whatever you click, it will automatically change everything, the info lines. It will change your facility, and it will do stuff in the background as well regarding your radio frequencies and such. So all you have to do is pretty much just choose something, and you should, if you wish to connect to the server, you leave it to automatic. VATSIM has various servers around the world that the software itself will recognize which is the best connection. And obviously you want to have connect to VATSIM ticked. You want to choose your applicable rating. So you cannot connect to delivery without at least an S1, ground and delivery without an S1 or student 1. I'm choosing student 3 here because I'm not connecting to the network. I am connecting to Sweatbox. Because up here, you also have select connection mode. You can connect direct to VATSIM. This is how you connect to the network. So direct to VATSIM, automatic connect, I will connect now as Dubai ground. If I don't want to do that, I can do some other stuff. I can do a proxy thing. I don't use it too much. Sweatbox, this is how we conduct simulated sessions. So before anyone ever jumps onto the live network, you will be put through a Sweatbox session. As the name suggests, you sweat in the box because it's the first time that you're put in the hot seat, putting yourself to use with everything you've learned. And all the planes and stuff that you see is controlled by the mentor. We will do that in a second. I'll just open this up just to show you what it would look like. And obviously server. I'm doing Sweatbox in this case. So let me just do that then. I will connect as a mentor ground facility. Everything looks good. And hopefully if you connect, you shall be greeted with a very satisfying, happy sound. That sound right there. It did not work. Okay. A sad sound instead. So the issue here is call sign in use. Okay, I believe there's a ground theory session already happening, I think. Yep, looks like that. I'll just leave that for the time being. We'll come back to this later. We'll just come back to this later once we dive into the individual positions of delivery and ground. But in the meantime, this is how the server works. I'll talk more in detail about the controls, how you interact, how you look around, how you can configure stuff, and obviously roles and tasks relevant to you as a controller. So if you're a delivery controller, what you should be tinkering with. If you're a ground controller, what you should be tinkering with. What are the tools that help you build situational awareness, proactivity, and things like that. How do you communicate with other controllers, with your with pilots, etc. So for the time being, this should cover the very basics on how you install stuff. Some general sort of rules of thumb, I recommend having things organized in sort of a folder, um, because as you kind of work your way up, you might control other airports. It's best to have everything organized nicely. And as as a mentor, I keep a separate folder where this one is kept completely untouched, so that it mirrors very much like what a student would have, and I can easily put things side by side. So that is Euroscope. That is audio for VATSIM, which I haven't shown yet. So this, once you connect as whatever position you're connecting in, assuming that your frequencies are primed up, and again, we'll do that once we connect to a certain position. Uh, Once you're connected, you can then press this button, provided you have this stuff configured correctly. So obviously your VATSIM credentials, choose your audio devices, and just adjust sensitivity. Make sure whenever you speak, it's within the green. Um, and you can have optional devices and whatnot. You can leave the rest of it as it is. You also need to bind a push to talk button. So this is a button on your keyboard that if you press down, that's when you transmit over the radio. If you release it, no one's going to hear you. You also have other options if you wish to do these. I do not recommend it, just like the software, but if you are having difficulty understanding people on the radio with the immersive audio effects that come from VHF radio, you can disable it. It will sound just like Discord or just any other voice over internet audio calling software. I don't touch this one as well. So again, you have other things if you need. If you have a Stream Deck, which I haven't tinkered with too much, but yeah, you can cancel that or apply it, and this should just sit there. You can minimize it. This is what I do. I press the up arrow so that it always stays on top. And there's a reason for this, because if I can just put this down here, it will show me when I'm transmitting. So in case I have a stuck mic or a stuck open mic, or if someone else is transmitting, I can see who's transmitting. It will also show the call sign, which is technically cheating, but this is VATSIM, so it is what it is. Obviously, in real life, you can't really tell who's transmitting unless they identify themselves on the radio, but here it will show you the aircraft that is transmitting. Sometimes it is useful for VATSIM, because sometimes I see people transmitting without a flight plan, or someone filed an incorrect call sign on their flight plan and they have a different call sign connected here and their flight plans don't match, whatnot. So that covers all the software with the exception of vATIS. I think I'll talk about this once we get to delivery. I think that should cover everything so far with the basic stuff. So at this point, any questions? I'm just going to look at the chat and I'll read through them really quickly. Just FYI, audio for VATSIM does not work. Okay, so this is, you do have other alternatives. I've heard of this one as well, vector audio. This is another one that's been coming up lately. To be honest, anything that can work with Euroscope, and the other thing as well is the VATSIM COC that you have to think of. You have to use authorized software as per, I forgot the specific rule, but it basically says use the software that VATSIM recognizes. Euro. No, okay. It was here somewhere. I can't find it right now. But regardless, vector audio is one of them. I believe there is one more, but if you want to just keep it simple, audio for VATSIM should do most of the stuff that you need, especially when you're starting out. Okay. It doesn't open in ground, so most likely it opened in this sort of view. I will talk about that once we get to how to interact with the controls. I'll get to that once we get to delivery in particular and see how it interacts with Euroscope. So I think that was your question. You can change views like this. There's two ways of doing that. You can left click up here and change it from AIR dynamic, which is a tower view, and it's dynamic as in based on your runway configuration, you'll see different information. You can come down to SMGCS, and that's this view right here. You might not see everything yet. You might not see taxiways, stand numbers. That's okay. That's by design. Once you connect to a controller position, that has areas of responsibility, whatever is within your area of responsibility, you will see it. The quicker way to do it is to press F1. I'll talk about that once we get to individual positions. Okay. What is the difference between ground 1 and ground 2? Like I said, that's a perfect example of what I said at the beginning. That will be covered. I haven't even gotten to ground yet. I haven't even gotten to area of responsibilities yet. It will be covered. But basically, in a nutshell, everyone has their own areas of control. Ground 1 has a certain area, ground 2 has a certain area. We'll talk about that. Whereas 1 and 2, you both see the same screen. However, you will have different areas to play with. Again, I will talk about that. Yep, question for Lath. Someone's talking about track audio. That's another one, I believe. If I just quickly look that up. That's also track audio for VATSIM. Yeah, I've seen a bunch of GitHub projects that do the same thing, track audio, vector audio. But yeah, audio for VATSIM is the official source, directly made by VATSIM. It should cover pretty much everything. But again, if you'd like a little bit more out of your audio client. Yes, Lathe, I will answer that once we get to, I will get to the controls once we dive into delivery. Chat box, yes. I've tried to press enter. So it's F1 and then either number 1, F1 number 2 on your keyboard. F1, 1, F1, 2. And if you're using a sector file that has more views, you might have F1, 3, 4, 5, depending on how many of these you have. So the first file is this one. The second file is that one. So you just kind of switch between that with F1 and then the number 1, F1, number 2. So that's how you do that. Again, I'll get to controls later. Any other questions based off of software, setting things up? And obviously, this goes without saying. Please know your credentials, your VATSIM certificate, your password. I recommend storing this somewhere. If you were just a pilot up until this point, this is the point where you pretty much will be interacting with your CID and your password very often. So I just keep it as a sticky note whenever I need it. This will be handy to you. So you can find this in your VATSIM email or membership details. I think that's enough questions for this. Shall I move on with delivery now? I hope so. I'm going to take the silence as a yes in the next 10 seconds. Okay, we got a thumbs up there. And we got a couple of other folks reacting to that. Awesome. Okay, I shall move on. All right. So next up, documentation. So as I said, SOP. You have some other supplementary stuff as well, like the radio telephony stuff. This teaches you, okay, what am I looking at? What happens when there's something happening here? How do I deal with that? How do I say it to them? What do I do with this? This teaches you 99% of that. And it's based off of this that I conduct all theory sessions, including this one. And it is chaptered to sections and page numbers. We've got diagrams. It's been worked on very intricately. It's also in the pipeline to update to other new things that have come up in the pipeline, such as changes to aerodrome layout and taxi stuff. But for the time being, I'll just stick to normal SOP. Whatever is in here, I will teach. Because it should cover everything, pretty much. And you can see, just as an example, hey, I forgot something about the departure procedures. I'd like to know what happens when someone can't, again, I'll talk about this, obviously. But I want to find something. I want to know what happens when someone is not able to fly an SID. We'll talk about all that, of course. You just come down here, oh, look, page 2-14. And you just scroll down to page 2-14 as it's labeled. That's 111, 2-16, 15, 14, right there. Omnidirectional departures, you just read through it. That should help you out. Most of them gives you examples if phraseology is involved. Most of them will give you techniques, again, with examples involved. Some of them will have tables for you to memorize. And again, some of them I will sort of explain in theory. So this document pretty much covers most of what you need. In addition to this, something very useful is if you come down to the chapters again, it is the appendix for taxi diagrams. Not just taxi diagrams, but also areas of responsibility, incursion hotspots. So this is stuff you will come back to very, very often, and it's very easy to get to. You just scroll to the bottom and you just find it from there, whatever it is that you need. Someone asked me about difference between ground 1, ground 2. Here you go. This is what's called areas of responsibility, and I'll talk about that once we dive into delivery in a moment. But you can see this explains what this is briefly. It gives you a pictorial representation of what's happening, and it changes based on runway configuration, which again is something I will talk about. So as per runway configurations, you might have slight variations in areas of responsibility. What if you're a ground controller and you'd like to know where to taxi people in various runway configurations? For example, here's 30 left, right. Ignore wherever it says non-depot or depot. From what I've been told from a real-life Dubai controller, depot is no longer used, so I'm not even going to tell you what depot is. It's not even used, so don't worry about it. You can essentially just use this at all times when you're on 30 duals. What happens if you shut down a runway? What happens if you shut down this runway? What happens when you switch them around? This diagram has pretty much everything, and as it suggests, blue lines indicate departure taxis, commonly used intermediate holding points, runway holding points in red. Pink, just ignore pink because we don't use that anymore. And taxiways with red, which comes down here like this, is not compatible with code F aircraft, Airbus A380 and 747-8. So this is useful. So essentially, your SOP is essentially your holy book. The way I conduct my theory sessions is that I expect the student to have read this, and we also have an examination that is required for you to pass. A lot of those questions come from this as well. So that way, when I come to the theory, I don't have to explain everything from scratch. I can just be like, hey, areas of responsibility, you know what to look for. So that is a little bit about this document, the SOP. You might have other guides as well. So I remember if you come down to the FAQ, you can use this as another source as well on Haya, which is the HQ system that we use if you just come down to log in via Arabian. You come down to resources, we have other stuff that might be relevant to you if you're looking to wonder, hey, what should I expect from as a student? What kind of things will I be put through as a student? So what does your training plan look like? So it's different for every rating, of course. For example, S1, you just have one sweatbox session. And me personally, I do one sweatbox for delivery, one sweatbox for ground. Maybe you can do both of them in the same sweatbox, depending on the mentor's availability. I sometimes take online sessions as well for delivery and ground on a case-by-case basis. But then you jump up to S2, things look a bit different. You have solo periods, things like that. You can come here. You'll see, for example, in the ATC training policy. And obviously, if you want to book yourself for events, you can see everything here as well. But for training, this is all you need, SOP and the RTM. So that pretty much covers documentation. Obviously, you have a manual for Euroscope if you'd like to look at that as well. If you really want to, there's a documentation there. That's up to you. So that's documentation. Any questions? This app can't run on your PC. I believe that is a Microsoft Windows Defender problem, if I'm not mistaken. Not sure. Works on a separate laptop. Yeah, I believe it's just your security settings. It might be. All right, moving on. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. So, the airport itself. This is Dubai. Dubai sits in the United Arab Emirates. Dubai is one of 7 Emirates. Fantastic place to visit, some fantastic places to live in, as I can testify, being a resident for 15 years. And the airport, Sits pretty much. I'll just open Sky Vector here. It sits on along the coastline. We've got some neighboring airports as well, Sharjah, Al Maktoum. But this is Dubai right here. Dubai International sits in UAE. Let's just go to the world map right here. This is Dubai. This is the airspace, and this is the aerodrome. Where is it? There we go. This is the aerodrome right here. So we've got two runways, parallel runways. In this view, north is up right here. That's north. So as you might know, how to read the alignment of a runway, we've got 3 zeros and we've got 1 2s. We've got 3 0 left, 3 0 right, 1 2 left, 1 2 right. We have various runway configurations, which I will dive into in a minute. Are there any clients for Mac? I believe for Mac OS, you'll need to use some kind of emulator. Yeah, you're going to have to look into Mac. Sorry. This is mostly Windows. I believe it should be okay on Linux as well, if I'm not wrong. I've seen someone use it on Linux, but Mac OS, you might need to use some kind of emulator or I forgot what the other word was, but like wine or something like that. Anyway, coming back on track. We've got some runways. This is the airport layout. You can familiarize yourself with it in your own spare time. But essentially, we have some aprons down here. We have a cargo terminal here, cargo center here as well. We've got some remote stands. We've got a technical center. We've got a VIP apron. There used to be an air show apron here. That's now just been replaced to just a remote apron. And obviously up here, we might have some hangars and stuff. Coming to the Euroscope view, as you could see, this has now changed orientation slightly. This is just to utilize better use of space, because if it were at an angle, I will have a lot of wasted space here that, you know, on a computer screen, this just makes more sense. But be wary of the fact that north is in that direction. So, but for the most part, west, east should be pretty intuitive from here. So that's the aerodrome. Obviously, when you look at the chart, you have to look at the specific charts to see details regarding the stands and the intermediate holding points. Obviously, you can see it here as well on Euroscope. Speaking of which, I'm just going to see if that session has... No, it hasn't. Okay, so let's try this instead. Let me try connecting to VATSIM as an observer. This is also something you can do. If you just like to connect and you just want to see what's happening, you don't want to connect, you don't want to tinker with flight plans, you would not want to talk to anybody, you just want to sit there and observe. You just choose OBS, your facility will be set to OBS, and in here you can just put in your initials, -Sierra Sierra, as per your name. And just go ahead and connect. Hopefully that should, actually no, I forgot one additional step as well. Make sure you use the correct rating. There it is. Connect. And there we go. You should start seeing some stuff now. And you should get some messages. I will, again, I'll move some stuff around just to make it more tangible here. Let's see if I can do that now. Okay. So right now, I'm not going to see things like taxiways. I can see holding points on the runways. I can see the runways themselves. I can see individual aircraft. However, I can't see taxiways and intermediate holding points and stuff because I'm not connected as a ground controller. So I was really hoping I could jump into Sweatbox, but I think someone else has a Sweatbox session happening at the moment. So yeah. Maybe have access to view the Miro. Sure, yeah. Let me see if I could do this. Anyone with the link can view. Copy. Oh, that's a team invite link. Never mind. Okay, see if this works. I understand that you might have to sign in with your Google account. There's also a chance that you might need to request permission. I'm not sure if that's going to be a problem. I did have issues with this in the past with one of my students, but I should be using it on my screen, so that should, you know, I'm sharing my screen, so hopefully that's good enough for you. But anyway, so there are intermediate holding points and taxiways that you don't see in this chart, and you definitely don't see here yet, because I'm not connected as a ground controller. But For that, of course, as well, you can look at the correct charts and familiarize yourself with the aerodrome as far as the layout is concerned. You can do what I'm doing here, observe. You can also tune into a frequency if you like. So for example, I'm just going to take this, I'm going to close that, I don't need that. There is a student on tower on that frequency. So this shows me all the controllers that are currently online. If I just left click on any one of them, I will see information down here. So for example, if I want to tune into tower's frequency just to listen to him, I can connect. It's not going to give me anything because I'm an observer. So I can drop down and I can add my own frequencies. So for example, I want to listen to the tower frequency. I can just do this and I can receive. I can listen to tower if I wanted to. I can't transmit, obviously. But yeah, don't worry about what XC is. So this is something you can do if you want. You can observe, you can just listen, you can look around, see what's happening, cross-check with your charts, and cross-check with the SOP. So, coming back to the aerodrome. So, as far as individual positions go, if you look in the SOP, you will know this. These are all the positions we have. Air traffic services. We provide full air traffic control services from delivery all the way up to tower. We have an ATIS as well. ATIS is also split into two frequencies, one for departures, one for arrivals. A departure ATIS and arrival ATIS. We've got Dubai delivery, abbreviation Ground Movement Planner, GMP. Dubai ground, and there's two of them. We'll talk about that in a second. Ground Movement Control 1, Ground Movement Control 2, associated frequencies. Dubai Tower, think of it as Dubai Tower North, Dubai Tower South, AIR 1, AIR 2, or Air Controller 1, Air Controller 2 frequencies. And we've got departures and arrivals and whatnot. We also have an additional tower information services for VFR aircraft. It's not really used that much in VATSIM. But as per these call signs, everyone has their own areas to play with the exception of delivery. Reason being, when we now jump into delivery, what are the tasks of a delivery controller? You pretty much check flight plans. And I'm on the network here as an observer. I can open up a flight plan if I wanted to by left click. So this is my departure list. If you want to move it around, you can do that. If for whatever reason it's disappeared, up here you have a menu bar. You can bring it back up on your quick settings, show departure list. And you have a drop down. You can arrange it alphanumerically. So let me just make this more clear. Okay. You can arrange it alphanumerically by left clicking any of these columns, and they mean different things. This is CS for call sign, aircraft. This is wake category, not important to you. If they're parked into a gate and Euroscope recognizes that gate, it will give you their position. This is flight rules. If it's empty, it's an IFR flight plan versus a VFR flight plan would have a V in it. Your departure, and left clicking this will open up your flight plan box, flight plan dialog. You can see their route, what altitude they filed, what their aircraft data is, some remarks, and other things regarding their flight time and whatnot. Their arriving destination, runway, SIDs, we'll talk about all that, of course. CFL, we'll talk about that. RFL is whatever. So CFL is cleared flight level. RFL is requested flight level, which is pretty much their cruising altitude that they've requested. XPDR, that's your squawk code. And I'll talk about squawks once we jump into delivery. This is your flight plan checker. This is a smart plugin that checks a few things in the flight plan with regards to your route, with regards to your altitude. I will get to that once I get to delivery. Dell, it's basically the name of a plugin that checks to make sure everything has been assigned in terms of initial climbs, and the runway assignment is correct as per your runway configuration. Sometimes you might not see this at all. It might look empty like that. It's probably because you haven't assigned your runways. You come up here, next to the clock, there's a runway symbol. You left click that, and you have your active airport selector dialog. Airport/runway selector dialog. So I'm controlling Dubai. I'm handling departures at Dubai and arrivals at Dubai. So you literally just left click it once, left click it twice, and there's 4 different columns, 4 different boxes to tick, because I could do departures on 30 right, arrivals on 30 left. If I want to do departures on 30 right and arrivals on 30 right as well for single runway operations. Whatever configuration I'm using, I can mess about. Suddenly, let's say we switch to 1-2s. And again, I will teach about which configurations to use when, but majority of the time you leave it like this. And once you press OK, hopefully that should bring this up, in addition to some other things as well, like your METAR. This will show you, again, you can pop this open if it disappears. There's all kinds of stuff that you could show here if you need to. Show METAR list right there. This is your ATC list, pretty much. You can see everyone that's online right now. We've got Ismail on arrivals, Musta'in on tower, Rashid's on the mentoring position. We've got ATIS frequencies up as well. So again, that's where you assign runways. Hopefully this should pop up. If you'd like to bring anything back into view, you can come back to the quick settings. You can move things around if you need to. Another thing you can do is on the very left, for example, I only want to see 4 planes. Everything else I have to scroll. That's per whatever you assign here. But I usually set it to unlimited, so I don't need to do any scrolling. However, for busy events, that thing might be quite big, so you might need to do that again. You might have some other stuff. So there was that radar display. I don't have that open. It's not necessary. I just use this radar display, which brings me to controls again. So you hold a right click to move around. You can use your mouse wheel to zoom in and out. And if you'd like to change view, you can come up here and go around like this. If you want to do it faster, F1 on your keyboard and number 1, F1, number 2. You can go back and forth. This is the radar view that I use. You have some other windows here that automatically populate whenever you connect. I keep the alerts open. I close departures. I keep the arrival. This is usually what I have. This is my usual setup. Something like this. So I have my departure list. I have my arrival window. This is up here in window. Lists. I have the arrival list. I can close that if I need to, just to bring it back. So this is a list that I can use to assign stands. Obviously, it's not going to work for me because I'm an observer. I can assign stands. It will automatically assign stands sometimes. I have a METAR list, and I have my controllers. And I have this alert box, which will come in handy once you're on ground. You have a chat box down here. Right now, it's not going to... I'm an observer, but let's say if I just primed myself up to some random frequency, which brings me to this, the headphones. This is your voice status and voice connection dialog. This is what you use to prime up to any frequency. Now, if you are connecting to one of those other positions like Dubai ground, Dubai tower, it should do it automatically. But on an observer, obviously it's just tuned into a random frequency that's invalid. I'm not going to be able to talk anywhere. So I would say, let's say I want to observe tower. I would come up here. You have your primary, so you can prime up to whichever frequency you'd like. I'm gonna prime up to Dubai tower. So Oscar Mike Dubai, Oscar Mike Delta Bravo, 1 tower. Prime up. I will receive text. I will be able to transmit text, but obviously as an observer, I'm not going to be able to do that. But that's just an automatic prompt. If I now close this, you can now see I'm now on the 118.750 text frequency. So obviously I can't send messages because I'm an observer, but if someone were a text pilot and they were texting, I would see it here. If I'd like to talk to someone else, let's say I'd like to talk to a controller, I can double click anybody. Let's say I'd like to talk to approach. I can type whatever message I want. I can hit send with enter. Let's say you have multiple messages. So I'm just going to quickly annoy Rashid by sending him some messages here. All right, so I've just sent him some messages. I can scroll up and down with page up, down to scroll up and down. You can see Rashid just responded to me. You can see the times that the messages were sent. You can also see that, you can also hear the notification tone whenever you get a text message. You can go page up and down to scroll, and when I'm done with that conversation, I can get rid of it, double click that, double click that. If I want to talk to a pilot on the frequency, I have to left click the call sign I'd like to talk to. Actually, come back to your frequency first. There we go. Down here, you will see who you're talking to. So we'll say Emirates 4 Papa Victor, because I've just selected 4 Papa Victor. If I just left-click this guy instead, Emirates 151. So whenever I type something, it will say Emirates 151, comma, whatever your message is. If you'd like to transmit a message without someone selected, you can press escape, and your message will just be for all stations, not directed at anybody. Another escape, and that collapses your chat box. This is good discipline. What I usually do is I keep it collapsed at all times. So if I get a text message from someone, suddenly this will open. It will flash, and I can open it. I can leave it open while I'm doing something else, and when I'm ready to interact, I can just do stuff there. And once I'm done with that conversation, escape. Obviously, you have some other channels. You have server setting. You have a server channel. You have a VCDM channel, messages. You don't need to have those open. It will just show you messages from Euroscope if you have technical issues or connection issues. Usually things like call sign in use. So for example, there's already a tower 1. If I try connecting as tower 1, it will send me a message saying call sign in use. You have an ATC channel as well. So anytime you want to talk to just ATC controllers, for example, if you want to say, hey, we're switching runway we're switching runway configurations, you just, whatever you type, you just put a backslash at the beginning, and you start typing stuff out, and then you hit enter. That will go to an ATC channel. There it is. Okay. So that's the ATC channel. Everyone's going to see it, so be careful with this. This is a public channel. Supervisors can see this. Other controllers can see this. So keep things concise, civil, and make sure you're not, having unnecessary chatter here. But yeah, you can come up here, and this is designed in such a way that you don't accidentally send a message. You always have to have backspace. Otherwise, if I try sending something, it's not going to work. So you can see other observers as well. I believe one of us is observing. That's Lyth. I recognize you from the attendance, I believe. So yeah, that pretty much covers an overview of how to interact with Euroscope in a nutshell. Obviously, if I had a position to control, I could transmit with my push to talk. You will see TX light up. That means I'm transmitting. RX means someone's transmitting on my frequency that I've primed up to. And as you can see, it's done it automatic. Actually, it hasn't. Okay, let's just do that again. Dubai Tower. Let's receive. And whoever talks.
Sarah, good day, Emirates 4 Papa Victor, Mike 4 Mike 13 Alpha. Correction, Mike 14 Alpha.
So you can see who's transmitting. Last received call sign was Emirates 4 Papa Victor. And that's Dubai Tower. So I keep this open so that if I'm not paying attention, if I'm doing something else, if I'm reading my SOP, if I'm fixing a flight plan, I quickly come back to Euroscope, I can see last received call sign. It was from Emirates 4 Papa Victor, if I needed it. So let's tune out from that. So now coming to delivery. If I wanted to tune into the delivery frequency, it's 120350. Obviously, I can connect up there with the appropriate connection. I'm going to disconnect for the time being, and we shall wait in queue for the sweatbox to open. Hopefully, start sweatbox S3 sweatbox. We'll wait for that session to finish. I think it has finished. Let's try it. Hopefully, it works. Nope, never mind. Message says nothing. Server says call sign in use, so there's already a sweatbox session going on still. I'll keep waiting for that. So let's just dive into some theory then. So as I showed you, you can open the flight plan box and you check these things. You check the route, you check the flight levels, you check the squawks. If you read the SOP, if you're familiar with VATSIM, you will know about 60% of what we do here in terms of what we're checking after. Things like direction of flight dictating your altitudes, your flight plan dictating your altitudes. You also have things known as RVSM airspace and non-RVSM airspace. So that's how you dictate altitudes. You also have, in your departure clearance, you have an altitude restriction of the initial climb as per the procedure. We'll talk about that in a second. So that would be the initial altitude, which in Euroscope is shown as CFL for a cleared flight level. Try sweatbox now. Okay, let me just check that. Hopefully this works. As my colleague pointed out, yes, it does. Awesome. Okay. Let me just tune everything correctly. Let's get rid of tower. Close. Runway. Sorry, not Abu Dhabi ground. I need Dubai ground, please. Dubai ground. Okay, so this is not the VATSIM network. This is Sweatbox. And as you can see, now that I'm a ground controller, if I zoom in, I can see more information. I can see intermediate holding points. I can see taxiways. If I zoom in further, I can see some more stuff like crossovers and stands. And as you can see here, my thing has just disappeared. As I pointed out, just try setting your runways. That should fix it. There it is. This should also allow me to dive into this departure list in more detail. So, right. Coming back to the theory now. So we check a few things. We check the route. I'll talk about that in a moment. We check altitudes in terms of your flight level. We have your CFL and your RFL, requested flight level, as per the flight plan of the pilot, and your initial altitude, which in Euroscope is shown as flight level. So CFL, which in Dubai, I'll talk about that once we get to the procedure. So we also check squawks. So every aircraft is going to be given a unique identification code, which, as you can see, everyone here, it's got set to 2000. Again, there are procedures on this, but I'll just briefly cover that. In Dubai, primarily the squawk code format is as follows. 62XX could be anything from 0 to 7, as per the transponder format. 05 something something. These two are primarily used for international aircraft or international flights. 60 something something is usually for the domestic flights. There are some other formats, but you don't have to worry about it because all you need to do, let's say I want to change Emirates 141 squawk, left click the associated squawk code, get SSR, and it automatically knows what the thing I've just said to you. Is it an international flight plan? Is it a domestic? It knows all of this. It will automatically assign a transponder code. What I'm going to say about this is that you should always assign squawk codes as soon as you get connected. As soon as somebody connects, I'm also going to get rid of some flight plans that I don't need, particularly on the VFR side for the moment. And again, you can arrange it alphabetically in ascending and descending order if you'd like. And get rid of 601 as well. Right, yeah, so always assign your codes. And there's reason for this because Euroscope is sometimes not smart. So this is the consequence of a feature in Euroscope whereby if you're a pilot flying from a different destination, you've likely already received a squawk from your departure airport. Euroscope will look at that and be like, all right, let's just synchronize whatever that squawk is to here. So someone might be flying into the UAE, flying towards London or whatever, and their squawk code from wherever they took off might be some other code, and it will synchronize to it. Why is this a problem? Because certain aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator, when you start it up, the code does not default to 2000. It defaults to other numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4. And it will synchronize to that 1, 2, 3, 4. So make sure you always assign your squawk codes. Always assign your squawk codes. So that's a little thing on squawk codes. Let's now talk about flight plans. Any questions thus far on sort of the controls of Euroscope or any sort of other things? Obviously, you have other things as well, like as Rashid just pointed out, we have aliases. We have separate channels as well. Again, it's all covered by Rashid pretty much. Message. What is call on VCCS? This is basically something that so this plugin that we use is built by Scandinavia, and this kind of comes with it. We don't use it because this is meant to work with TeamSpeak, which we don't use. As you can see, VATSIM Scandinavia, we don't use this, but you could, if you want to, set it up. It's kind of a pain. I did try it. You could call individual controllers, but again, that's only if you're connected on TeamSpeak, which we don't use. We use Discord, obviously, on our own voice channels. So if I'm controlling Dubai, I would be down here somewhere. So yeah, I wouldn't use that if I were you. Yeah. So I think I can dive into the checking process as delivery. And some of the other things that you are required to know as a delivery controller, which most of which is covered in the SOP. But essentially, it comes down to understanding why we do reroutes, why are there flight level restrictions, and obviously I just explained what squawk is, or how that works. But you also need to know about the airport, because every controller, and this is now where I get to areas of responsibility, which is basically this diagram down here. Again, I'm presuming no questions, so I'm just kind of carrying forth with this. So areas of responsibility. Right now, I'm in the 3 zeros configuration. So 3 zeros meaning, the standard 3 zeros configuration meaning, runway 30 right for departure, runway 30 left for arrivals. 80% of the time, this is what we use. This is the preferred configuration. Sometimes we might close a runway, and sometimes we might use 1-2s. I'm sure some of you might know 1-2s make sense if you're on 3 zeros, if you have a tailwind, it makes more sense to use 1-2s. It's not so simple because if you look at the departure procedures, so now that we're in delivery, let's look at the departure procedures. So an SID, this is concerning IFR departures, instrument flight rules. VFR, it's different. In IFR flight plans, there's a procedure that takes an aircraft from the airport to the first waypoint of their flight plan, and the waypoints are, as per the charts, RIDAP, Senpa, Nabix, Mirat, Kutli, Emeru, Anvix, Ivuro, Davmo. And depending on which runway configuration you're using, it's either a foxtrot if you're on the 3 zeros and you have the cycle. So if there's ever going to be a change in your SID procedure with an AIRAC release, it will be updated. For example, if RIDAP 2 foxtrot, all of a sudden the AIP decides, the authority decides, hey, let's have a altitude restriction here, just like how we have some here, speed restrictions and stuff. Let's have an altitude restriction here. That will now cycle up to the RIDAP 3 foxtrot. So that's the cycle number. You have RIDAP 2 foxtrot, Senpa 2 foxtrot. The foxtrot meaning it's an identifier. If we now switch to the 1-2s, we have golfs, 3 golf, Nabix 3 golf, Mirat 3 golf, etc. So these are your SIDs. They come with their own. Again, you can read the charts and familiarize with this. But the thing to take away is, if you notice, if you take into account most of the flight activity out of the Middle East flies primarily to the European destinations. In the 3 zeros layout, you have plenty of space to play with when you're a departure controller to be able to sequence individual SIDs. However, in the 1-2s, you can see a lot of the SIDs that go that way are all following a common trombone segment. And so essentially, as a departure controller, you have less room to play with. And what happens is your departure rate, the rate at which you can depart aircraft out of your runway, starts to decrease. So as a result, the UAE prefers using the 3 zeros as much as possible, including, if you might have read the SOP, you might have seen this, including a 5-knot tailwind component. Not just a 5-knot tailwind. So for example, if the METAR reads, so if this is 300, let's say it's 100 at 5 knots. You might think, oh, that's a tailwind of 5 knots from this way, something like this. It's the component. So this wind itself might be 5 knots, but how much of those 5 knots acts as a tailwind component on the runway itself? And the answer to that is obviously trigonometry. You could do some trigonometry if you want to do math. The very easy way to do this, just go to a website such as FlightRadar24 and just go to the UAE airspace and just see what they're doing. Oh, look, everyone's landing on 30 left. So 30 left for arrivals. Do I see people departing 30 right? Let's find out. Here's a NAS Express that just departed. And he departed 30 right. Cool. All right, 30 rights today. Done. That's the easy way to do it. But yeah, obviously, if you see the METAR changing like this, keep an eye on it. You have other things to think about in terms of visibility. You might go into LVO, low visibility procedures. Again, all that's in your SOP. But the point that I'm trying to establish here is that the 3 zeros is what's called the preferred configuration. Quote unquote, preferred configuration. And so based off of this, I will make one asterisk. For today's training, a lot of the components that I'm teaching you apply to the 3 zeros. I'm only going to be teaching the 3 zeros, and I only teach 3 zeros for my students, unless they would like additional practice on 1-2s just for a change. Reason being, if you can understand the fundamentals and the basics of 3 zeros, you can port over what you've learned and that knowledge, read the SOP, look at the diagrams, and apply your skills on the 1-2s. But the 3 zeros is where you learn all your fundamentals and see why things are the way they are. So that being established, the area of responsibility changes based on your runway configuration. You can see there's a slight difference in, for example, the tower controllers have a little bit more area to play with on this side compared to the 3 zeros, as you can see. And likewise in the north, things change up there as well. Regardless, as per your area of responsibility, which right here I'm going to talk about 3 zeros. While talking about 3 zeros, you have tower 1 here, tower 2 here. I've also drawn this on the board. You have tower 1 here controlling the north runway and the associated holding points and parallel taxiways to it, such as taxiway Mike. You have 30 left, which is controlled by the tower south. They control the holding points as well as some additional areas down here, which you can see here. Now for you as a delivery controller, this is what's important. Essentially what you do is I split the airport into half between both runways. So just kind of split it like this in half. You draw a line sort of in between both runways. And from that line, come to this taxiway right here, Lima 3, go up and down. And that all of a sudden creates a sort of box for you. This green box right here. This green box that runs up like that and goes right. Anything inside of this box is for ground 1. Anything outside of it is for ground 2. Ground 2, ground 2, ground 1, ground 1, ground 1. This entire thing is ground 1, ground 2, ground 2. So essentially, as a delivery controller, since these are your only tasks, so if something happens outside of this task, someone says, hey, I'm ready for pushback. This is not your job. This is the job of a ground controller. You will hand off the aircraft to the correct ground frequency based on where they're sat. And that's why it's important for you to know areas of responsibility. It's even more important once you're a ground controller, but for delivery, this is where this comes in. So yeah, stick to your areas of responsibility, stick to your actual responsibilities. Someone calls for pushback, you hold position, contact ground based on which frequency to go to. There might be other things to do as well. For example, what happens when, so the actual checking process, I'll explain that one by one. But essentially you check flight plans, you might have to come up with routes, you might have to issue reroutes, you might have to correct flight plans, you might have to ask people to correct flight plans. You might even have to add an ATIS. So you get vATIS from your browser. There's going to be a link for that, and you grab an ATIS pack, which can again be found on the Discord. You just import that, and then you go to D for departures, A for arrivals. You choose your runway configuration, so 30 right for departure, 30 left for arrival, and if you connect, You will connect it. It will do everything else. Automatically, there will be a audio frequency. There will be a text information popped up. You can left click on airport condition and enforce something you like. This is usually not used unless you have LVO, low visibility operations. You can close that. No TAMs if you want to let everyone know that single runway ops is in progress and you've closed a certain runway. You do it here. Same thing here as well. Obviously, make sure you're choosing the correct airport code. There's also a unified one. So if you prefer to just have one ATIS client open or one ATIS open, you have the ATIS code. You can left click to cycle it. It will go alphabetically. By default, it always connects with alpha. It will automatically recycle if it detects a change in the METAR, or if you have to change something here, you have to manually assign a new ATIS code. If you are a controller, you will see the ATIS here. You can right-click on that to get ATIS, and the METAR will also automatically, provided we use the departure and arrival ATIS like this, you will also get the code up here. It will be automatically synchronized. If you'd like to be notified, you can send a message to the ATIS channel. You can send a message saying subscribe, 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 and it will tell you are now subscribed to receive ATIS information updates, and that should notify you if you have any ATIS updates. So that's all the stuff with what you do as a delivery controller. How you do them will be the next segment. For the time being, I think that covers everything as far as what you do as a delivery controller. So if anyone has questions at this point, let me know. Someone's saying I was lagging for a bit. Just I hope not. I presume that was just your internet connection there. How long do we believe I have left? So this, what to do, how to do it for delivery, I would say another 15 to 20 minutes. After that, I can get to ground, which should take another 30 minutes, hopefully. Again, I understand time is an issue. Can't you connect ATIS and Sweatbox? No, unfortunately not. I understand the timing might be an issue to some, as it is to me as well. This is where hopefully the live recordings should benefit those that can't attend completely. But yeah, any other questions, hopefully? None of them, I can move on. You have it like, okay, so you're using the outdated sector file. So make sure you get the latest version. You could see when it was released. You could see the ARAC that is compliant with it. Always use the latest one. This will tell you the changelog, and you should just get the latest one. You can find it on your Discord server here. UA resources, download link, it will take you to this website. Shantanu, I would bring that up with Rashid if I were you. Because I'm being quite elaborate here with every little thing, like explaining the software, explaining every intricate detail as much as I can. So it will take a little bit of time. I understand that that's a bit of an inconvenience, but this is to take into account all sort of audiences. But again, ideally, if you read the SOP and if you show up to theory sessions or even a Sweatbox session, if you've read the SOP, it should come quicker to you as well. Okay, I'm going to move on to what you actually do as a delivery controller, how you do them. So starting with flight levels, obviously you have the even odd rule. I'm sure everyone knows this. On VATSIM, if you're a pilot, so if you're in an IFR flight plan, if your flight flies between these headings, and you can also check this in your Euroscope as well, if you go to the outside view, and if I were to right click any arriving, there we go. If I right click on the destination, you can see their flight plan like this, the route. You can see that one goes westbound and disappears after a couple seconds. Here's one going to Kennedy. Here's one going to Mumbai. I can see which direction it is, and you can just see what direction that is. As per that direction, they have to be on an odd flight level up, and so odd flight level, so that would be 1,000. This is in feet. So flight level, as you might know, versus altitude. If we're flying at 10,000 feet, flight level will essentially remove 2 zeros. Actually, hang on, let's just, yeah. So this is 10,000 feet. However, there's one more thing to think about when it comes to flight level. Flight level and altitude also comes down, so obviously 350 here means 35,000 feet. This is 35,000 feet. 350, you just add 2 zeros, and that becomes your altitude. However, there's something else that you need to think about. Flight level and altitude ultimately come down to your transition altitude as well as your transition level. What does that mean? So anytime you're flying in altitude, you're flying with the local QNH. So if the local QNH right now is 1010, as per the SID, your initial climb, as it says on the chart, is going to be 4,000 feet. Regardless of runway configuration, your initial climb is always 4,000 feet. So I'm just going to write that down as well. 4,000 feet. Altitude 4,000 feet. So now I'm going to ask a question. This is to bring in some interaction, hopefully. Can someone tell me, why is it a bad idea to say maintain flight level 40 or 040? Why is this bad? I'm asking this because I've seen it a lot. I've seen pilots say this. I've even seen pilots do this, flight level, and put it here, which is ridiculous because that would imply that you're flying at, if you had 2 zeros, you're flying in space at 400,000 feet. So you really do have to think about what does flight level even mean, and this is your hint. This is where you would fly under QNH 1010. What happens here at flight level? Can I get an answer for that from anyone? Could be ambiguous, sure. But what is the main thing? Even if, so in this case, 04, they're saying it correctly. They're not saying for flight level 4,000 or flight level 400. They're saying it correctly. 040. It's the same quote unquote equivalent value. But I'm telling you it isn't. And why is that? Someone said transition level. It has something to do with the transition level, sure. What happens above the transition flight level? What do you do with your altimeter? Flight level is not. Okay, so what is flight level instead? Standard, there we go. So here, you don't use QNH, you use standard pressure of 1013. So even if someone reads back flight level 040, that's incorrect. That would imply that they will fly this procedure below an altitude that requires you to fly on local QNH at standard pressure. The consequence of that depends on the altimeter. So if your QNH is 1010 and if they set 1013, on our screens they will be higher than they're actually supposed to be. So we see this guy at 4,000 feet. That guy might be at 4,200 or 4,300. You can do the math for every hectopascal change, how much feet do they climb? And from there you can see someone might be higher than they should be, someone might be lower than they should be. The reason I'm bringing this up is because on Euroscope it shows flight level. You don't say flight level, you say altitude. And how do you assign it? There's two ways. Where it says CFL, it stands for cleared flight level. You can left click here and it automatically highlights the standard one at Dubai. A much quicker way of doing it is to use the Dell plugin checker. So where it says, it tells you, this is going to check, is there anything weird about it in terms of squawks, flight levels, or even runway. If I suddenly choose a weird runway, it will also highlight this in a different color and will tell you runway is weird as well. But if I now left-click CFL, watch what happens to his CFL. I left-click that, goes immediately to 4,000. And you can see there was a runway prompt. I just changed it. So that should be okay. Something wrong with his SID. Let me just fix that. Red up 2 Foxtrot. There we go. Okay, so it's okay now. So left-click that. Okay, okay. So this sets everyone's CFLs instantly. As you can see, it's all coming down to 4,000 feet. So just like how I said, assign your squawks when someone pops up here, assign your CFLs. It literally takes one click. Always keep this up to date. Always keep this up to date because if someone calls you up, you have to have everything assigned. You can't just if you try doing it while he calls you up, you're gonna have some trouble later. So make sure it's all selected. It should all say okay. If you have anything weird happening, it will give you the issue. As you said, as you might have seen there, it said something about the SID. I opened the flight plan. I noticed for some reason the SID was duplicated. Redap 2 Foxtrot became twice, so I just fixed that. The route should only need your initial waypoint as per your procedures. You can manually assign your route SID from there. So if we suddenly go to 1-2s, look, so now I'm choosing 1-2s. This is a conflict with my runway configuration. It will shout at me saying runway. So I've left-clicked that. It's now fixed it back to 30 right. I can set it to 30 right, and now it's going to give me an error. This is just a bug. You can just get rid of. You can see it's put in there twice, REDAP and REDAP for both runways. So I'm just going to fix that. There we go. So if you see an OK, you're pretty much good to go. So, yeah. That's your CFL, that's your squawks. And based off of what you see here, you will talk to planes as they talk to you, pretty much. So we have this as well, FPC, your flight plan checker. I'll get back to that in a second. But if you see everything is okay, everything is good to go, pretty much as soon as that guy calls you up, you're ready to transmit your IFR clearance. And that is done in a certain phraseology format, taken straight from the SOP here, which is call sign, your call sign. This is something you always say on your initial contact. Anytime you talk to someone for the first time, you talk and you say who you are. So if Emirates 8 Kilo Charlie is talking to you for the first time, you have to identify yourself as Dubai Delivery. Clear to, if you know the destination, you can say the name. If not, clear destination via the SID, maintain altitude 4,000 feet, squawk. So again, Emirates 8 Kilo Charlie Dubai Delivery cleared to Heathrow via RIDAP 1 Foxtrot, maintain altitude 4,000, squawk 0513. I'm going to ask a few questions to you guys. Number one, where's the departure runway? I know this is going to be a question someone's going to have. So I'm going to ask you instead. Where's the departure runway? There you go. Someone's already pointed it out. What happened to the departure runway? I didn't say 30 right. It's not. There is no 30 right here. So what happened to the runway? Why am I not saying the runway? Why would that be? If anyone could come up with an answer. There's no wrong answer so far. You could just try and think why that might be. Think out of the box as well. Could it change? Well, let's think about it. If it did change, it wouldn't be the RIDAP 1 Foxtrot, would it? If it was the 1-2s, it would now be the RIDAP 3 Golf. That's actually a hint for you right there. This SID does tell you something about the runway. That's your one hint. And the other hint that I'll give you is in the chart. This procedure applies regardless of what runway you choose. So 30 left departure, 30 right departure, they both take you to the same waypoint. So even if you don't know which runway, you can literally choose an incorrect runway on your flight plan in the FMC. Not saying that's a good thing because you'll have other problems with regards to runway performance and whatnot, but you will still fly the correct procedure if you read back 1 Foxtrot. But lastly, there's another information. There's another answer for this. That's the one I'm trying to find. Different SID and runway. So think about if you're the pilot, how do you know what's happening at the airport? Where do you get this information? Is there anywhere ATIS, exactly. The ATIS will tell you departure runway 30 right in use, arrival runway 30 left. And if someone says, hey, you didn't tell me the departure run, well, haha, you just exposed yourself, you didn't read the ATIS, or you didn't tune to the ATIS, which would tell you your departure runway is 30 right. So now obviously the other question is, well, would it really hurt to add 30 right in there? In fact, would it really hurt to say RDAP 1 Foxtrot departure? Would it really hurt to say things like, you are cleared down there? Instead of this, you could change some stuff around. What happens when you do stuff like this? Why is this bad? I am only going to say, then I'm never going to repeat myself again, because this is something I always sort of preach, and I only preach it once, because it comes down to you and your individual practice and discipline. There's two reasons why we don't do stuff like this. Why don't you say the runway? Why don't you say RDAP 1 Foxtrot departure? First of all, this is an SID, standard instrument departure. There's no need. But more importantly, the two reasons are, number one, this is what's said in the real world, as per the testimonies of pilots that work for the VACC that fly in and out of Dubai. Can't concur with this. This is what is said. So number one answer is realism and immersion. Number two, oh God, I have some 20 flight plans to deal with, 15 flight plans to deal with. And they're all going to be on my frequency, stepping over each other, yelling over each other. It's going to be crazy. So if I have to talk to a million planes, let me just do an experiment. Emirates 8 Kilo Charlie, Dubai delivery, cleared to Heathrow via RIDAP 1 Foxtrot, maintain altitude 4,000 feet, squawk 0513. What was that, 7 seconds? If I now say you are cleared to London Heathrow via the RIDAP 1 Foxtrot departure, runway 30 right, your initial climb is going to be for that, whatever. Let's say that becomes like 15 seconds worth. What starts to happen is if you keep saying that over and over for every single flight plan, you are now wasting valuable time saying things that you don't need to say. And for all the time that you spend transmitting these things, that time multiplies. So as I said, if you keep it down to a minimum at a pretty audible pace, comprehensible pace, you can transmit this in 7 seconds. The difference between a 7-second transmission and a 20-second transmission, you've wasted 13 seconds here. That adds up to a 26, 39, and automatically by this point, you've literally wasted an entire minute with all these planes that could have called you up. You could have given a clearance. Maybe if no one talks, you could have fixed a flight plan. You could have read the SOP. You could have done something. This doesn't just apply to this. This applies to any phraseology standard that we have. It has its own reasons, but ultimately it comes down to keeping information concise and whatever's needed, nothing unnecessary. So because the thing you have to think about is your VHF radio that you transmit, it's two-way. However, when you transmit, you cannot hear back from other people. You won't hear back from them. You must have seen this as a pilot. If pilots step over each other, you hear that humming noise, and it cuts the feed for yourself. Where if you're the one blocking or stepping over a frequency, you won't be able to hear. So that being established, if you keep information to a minimum, if you follow standard phraseology, you get all the information across. It saves you time, gives you time to do other more important things. So this is the only time I'll say this, even for ground. I'm not even going to mention this for ground now. Stick to standard phraseology. So once again, Emirates 8 Kilo Charlie, Dubai delivery, cleared to Heathrow via RDAP 1 Foxtrot, maintain altitude 4,000 feet, squawk 0513. I'm really hoping there's no questions for this one. I think I've made myself quite clear on the strictness of phraseology on that one. Unless anyone has questions. I'm going to presume that's a no. Okay. Miro in dark mode, I don't think so, no. I might be able to, but I think that's a premium feature. I apologize for that. I do not use premium. Create with AI templates. No, if I do this, it's going to erase everything. I'm sorry, man. Excuse me. Right, okay. So, now the question is, all right, how do you know that it's going to be the Red App 1 Foxtrot? How do you know which flight level to assign? And what happens when this comes into the picture, FPC? So this is where we now come down to the route correction aspect and how it also plays into flight level. So to explain this, I'm going to spend, I would say, 5 minutes just trying to explain a concept known as ATFM, Air Traffic Flow Management. It might seem a little bit comprehensive, but it's a very simple concept that answers a fundamental question, which is, okay, why is this wrong? What is wrong with this route? Why is this a bad route? Why is that a bad route? Why is that a bad flight level? Take a look at this. This guy is, maybe not this one. I think this one. No, okay. So this guy, he's flying to Bahrain. If we go to the outside view here, oh, look, he's flying westbound, and he filed for 320. That's an even. You have to be even for a westbound, right? IKIFR, westbound. There you go. It's all even up until 400 and up until 410 for odds. Above that, you get to non-RVSM. I'll talk about that in a second. So what's the issue here? It tells you there's something wrong. Why is that? Even though it's the correct direction. What's the problem there? In addition to this, like I said, what is the problem with this guy's route? Why is it showing me an error message for that route? Because I can tell you that, look, everything is okay. All the waypoints and airways connect properly. You can see if they connect properly like this. It says okay. You can see the ETAs for each waypoint and everything. So this route, you don't see any missing airways, and anytime there is a missing airway, it's just a direct. So there's one here. It says direct ANVIX. Why is this a problem? The problem here comes down to this, ATFM, which is what I'm going to try and explain. With a simple story, I shall dive into that. So, the story goes like this. I have two people. Actually, I have three. But for the time being, let's think about two people. Someone wants to depart from Dubai and fly to Riyadh, right? Again, sky vector. This is the UAE. This is Qatar and Bahrain up here, and Saudi Arabia, and Riyadh comes down here, right there. That's where we're flying to today. The other guy wants to do the exact same thing, except he wants to depart from Muscat, which is neighboring to the east in Oman, right here. This is Muscat. Both of them, if you look at it, will fly a common FIR. So what is an FIR? It's a region, right? So if I just go to brief for a second, if I try and create a new flight plan, new flight plan, there we go. Okay, and I'll change this view to Navigraph world map. Every region of airspace has its own boundary, flight information region. So as you can see, this green boundary inside, so obviously on this side it's Tehran, but on the inside you can see it's the Emirates FIR, the UAE FIR, and this is the boundary. This is the associated boundary for this. UAE Emirates FIR. Over here we have the Muscat FIR. You can see the green dash boundaries. Over here we have Doha in this funky little shape. Right here, this is all Doha. We have Bahrain. And lastly, we have Jeddah, the FIR. These are just regions of airspace, basically. FIRs, flight information regions. So both of these flights from Emirates onwards both fly the common FIRs. We fly through Doha, Bahrain, and Jeddah, both of them. In simple words, the route becomes the same once you hit this bit. The route becomes the same. Now, why am I talking about this? This is where I'll dive into the story now. So imagine we are not delivery controllers, not tower controllers, not even approach, but center controllers. Maybe even departures, but center controllers specifically. En route. Let's say the guy that departs Dubai is exiting the FIR via Alpop. You can also see the boundary here, this boundary right like this, via this waypoint, Alpop. And let's say now, imagine you are the en route controller and you have all your Dubai departures climbing along that airway, climbing to their cruise altitudes, but then you realize all your Muscat flights are also doing the exact same thing. Your Muscat flight's doing the exact same thing. They're coming from a different airway and then they merge along the same airway. Why is this a bad problem? Because if you look at it from the side, like a vertical profile, if you have someone cruising like this and you now have someone departing an airport, flying into the cruise altitude or maybe through it along the same airway, this is very difficult to sequence, to space, to sequence. It's very, very difficult. If you have a guy flying in one direction, another guy sort of merging along the same airway and climbing, it's very difficult to try and get this blue guy to slow down, give room for the red guy. It's very, very difficult. Compared to, you know what, all those Muscat guys, let's just put them on a different airway. All the Muscat guys, let them come from this airway down here, but they could still exit by the same waypoint. This becomes good because if we now put this side by side, and I'm just going to approximate my airway here, it's not going to be 100% accurate. Let's say someone's here and someone's here. This is actually easier. We can actually see the time it's going to take for this guy to reach this waypoint, the time it's going to take for this guy to reach this waypoint. If it looks bad, one guy can slow down, one guy can speed up. This is much easier to sequence. Much, much easier to sequence. So what happens after Alpub? Well, they follow the exact same route because they don't have to. They're going to the same destination. They follow literally the exact same route. It's just that when they merge within UAE, we make sure that they're separate. Once they're separate, so obviously one guy gets here, the other guy is going to be sufficiently spaced out with the required spacing, whatever. And then once they get to to Qatar, or whichever place they're flying to, they're going to be sequenced nice and neat. Congratulations, you have just done ATFM. That's literally what ATFM is. So based off of this, like I said, I came up with the rule that I want Dubai departures to be on this airway. I want the transits from Muscat to be on this airway. The ones that make these rules is the governing body, the UAE's General Civil Aviation Authority. I can go to these links if you want, gcaa.gov.ae. That's also in the Discord and in GitHub and stuff like that. So essentially, in these aviation authorities, they release what's known as AIP, Aeronautical Information Publication. And it's in there that you find the rules that I just explained. Like Dubai departures fly that route. Transits from Muscat must be on that airway. And if both of you want to fly to this destination, this is the waypoint that you exit. From there, you just follow. It's the AIP that tells you what to do. Specifically this section right here. So if we now come to, we're departing Dubai and we want to land as per the story in Riyadh. Riyadh is in the Jeddah FIR, as you can see, Oscar Echo Juliet Delta FIR. Maybe it might also not hurt too much to know the destination airport as well. It's Oscar Echo Romeo Kilo. That's the Riyadh airport. There it is, Oscar Echo Romeo Kilo. So why am I saying this? It's because if you look here in the AIP segment, again, you can go to that link to open this if you want. There is a route that tells you, hey, if you are departing, so this applies if you're departing UAE airports for Dubai departures, not just Dubai, but also Al Maktoum and Sharjah. If you're flying to the Jeddah FIR, can get rid of this. If you're flying to this destination, you have to fly this airway right here and this waypoint. Subsequently, if you're transiting instead, for transits, you enter, if you want to fly to Alpob, which it also has some notes. These notes can apply, as you can see, it says it's for traffic flying to Jeddah and to one of these destinations. Some of them will also have notes on, hey, this altitude is not available. Only this altitude is available. You have to be above this altitude, whatever. So it not only applies to routes, but also applies to flight levels. Nevertheless, if you want to enter UAE from Muscat, and if you want to fly into Jeddah, you have to follow this route. It still takes you to Alpob. And see what happens after Alpob. Sempa, November 571, Alpob. This is from Muscat, Rovos, whatever, Alpob. After Alpob, the route stays the same completely. They're nice and sequenced. Why is this important as a delivery controller? It's important as a delivery controller because you pretty much make sure that your departures out of Dubai comply with ATFM. Once you do that, you won't have that issue that I described. So now the question is, well, gosh, okay, do I have to memorize this entire thing? Not necessarily, because your sector file comes with a plugin that does that, at least this far. Now, obviously, outside the UAE, there's going to be different ATFM rules. So from Doha onwards, if you're transiting towards Bahrain and then Jeddah, I've just added those screenshots. As you can see, this is now different. It says this is for UAE traffic to Jeddah FIR, unless you're landing in one of these airports. You're supposed to cross in level flight for this waypoint. This altitude is not available, blah, 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 blah. And obviously in Jeddah itself, it tells you, hey, if you want to land at Jeddah, or if you want to land at Riyadh from Bahrain FIR, you have to follow this route. I've used all of this and constructed this route right here. And I've done the exact same process for the Muscat guy. As far as us delivery controllers, you just care about whatever happens inside the UAE. That's all that this thing checks for. That's all that the thing checks for. And as such, if you now look at the error messages, so for example, this guy, Anvix tardy. Oh, that's bad. So Anvix Lima 223 tardy. Let's just try that for a second. Lima 223 tardy. There's still an error message. Now it tells me something else. It tells me EO. EO reminds me that their altitude is also not correct. They're flying to, I believe that's Addis Ababa. And if I just, yep, they're flying eastbound, and it does not comply with the even odd rule. So let's just amend that. And this is also well above RVSM airspace. I'm just going to bring this down to RVSM airspace. Let's just give it 3.6. Actually, now he's flying to the east, so it needs to be 3.5. There you go. Flight plan's been fixed. Flight plan has been fixed. Let's try this one as well. Navix Papa 699 Auxari. Does that look bad? Navix, I see some Auxari stuff. But what's wrong here? This is to the Doha FIR. This is to the Doha FIR. Where is he flying to? He's flying to Jeddah. And for Jeddah, he has to use this one. So the point is now, all this work, as you can see, it's a lot of memorization. You don't have to do that. Why? Because we talk to SimBrief. We have folks on our team that talk to SimBrief and submits routes based on real flight plans, as well as all the information that we have in our AIPs. And if you suddenly just punch in, what was that flight plan again? Dubai to Jeddah. I'm using SimBrief again. Just take an aircraft so I can get a route out of it. And regarding Iraq, you might not have Navigraph. I recommend getting Navigraph as is, but you don't have to dispatch the flight plan itself. You just have to be able to see the routes. It might say it's invalid, but here's the key. It's in purple. That means this is one of our submitted routes. This is what I was talking about. We submit to SimBrief, to Navigraph, all these routes that are compliant with ATFM. We take all the hard work out of you. We take all that hard work out of you. So two things start to happen. Number one, pilots going into SimBrief will always have, look, even if I didn't open that, if I just generate this one, it would have chosen the first option, which would have been the preferred one. Secondly, if you do have an anomaly, like in this case, it's literally as simple as Let's just compare that side by side. So vmem, you start from the back. You always start from the back because from there you can see if there's something that connects. So vmem, Kia, November 687. Let's see if there's something here from the back. All I see is this VOR right here, Kia. Everything else needs to be changed. So let me just do that. Senpa, Quebec 212, to Kia, and then flight plan route. So if I just do that real quick. Senpa, Kia. Okay, flight plan has been fixed. Cool. Always fix the flight plan with the routes first before doing the altitudes because that's the way the plugin works. If you have both an altitude error and a route error, it will only show you the route first. You correct the routes first, then it will remind you what the issues are with your altitude. So in that case, we saw that it said EO. But what about here? So here we've got, again, it's a route thing. Let's just look at the routes. So 80% of the time, the destinations should be included in SimBrief, as you can see. Pretty much included. Just one. Compare that. I think that's a full reroute. Let's just take the whole thing, punch that in there. Done. Fixed. So what's wrong here? Navix Papa 699 Alcan. So it's along the Papa 699 airway. So it's technically compliant. So what's the issue here? The issue says max. What does that mean? Well, like I said, ATFM not only has routes, but it also has notes regarding altitudes and level restrictions. Based off of that, if we now come to the SOP where it says level restrictions, this is something that would help you if you memorized it. If it would only let me search. Level. Nope. Let's just find it ourselves then. Delivery, omnidirectional, level restrictions 2-15. 322. 215. Here we go. Aircraft routes out of the aerodrome must comply with all routing and level restrictions as described in the MATS document, the route checker system, blah, 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 what we've just explained. Here we go. To these airports, Hamad, Old Doha, Bahrain, max flight level is 260. So let's bring that down to 26. Flight plan's been fixed. So it's pretty much a matter of whenever you fix flight plans like this, you have to communicate to the pilots. You have to let them know, hey, your flight plan's invalid, or you have to do things like that. That we will cover in individual Sweatbox sessions when you're having practical sessions with your mentor. That can be covered there. For now, I'd like to move on to what happens after they receive clearance. When the readback is correct, you come up here to STS. This is status. Left click that. So the first thing you should do is if someone calls you up, they say, yep, Dubai delivery, this is Lufthansa 631, information, whatever. If you start hearing someone, STS freak for frequency, that's when you start seeing the tag. That's when you start seeing the tag. If you don't do that, you don't see it. Yeah, so it would be invisible. So STS basically shows you the state of the aircraft. Freak means on your frequency. DI is de-icing. Obviously, we don't use de-icing here. SU is startup, more relevant for GA planes. Push and start for pushback. TX for taxi. LU for lineup. TO for takeoff, and one empty placeholder to clear it. So when someone's on your frequency, you put it to freak. Once readback is correct after the clearance, left click that. It says OK. This reminds you that they've received IFR clearance. Your STS and your IFR clearance receipt flag is synchronized to every other controller. They will be able to see it. So if all of a sudden you're controlling and someone comes in and starts observing you, they can see who's been cleared and who's doing what. Sometimes there might be some mismatches, in which case they might ask you to just refresh it. They just make you refresh it. Same here, you just left click, double click, and that should fix it from their end. And then at any point, once they report ready for pushback, provided they are squawking the correct code. So here, on the tag, you can see 0513 is in red. What is 0513? That's the code that's been assigned to them. It's in red. I must make the aircraft squawk first. And that's where that thing disappears, and they're squawking the correct code. At that point, contact ground on, depending on who's online, depending on where they are, as per AORs, whichever controller. Right? Okay, what if they can't fly an SID? Then we have something known as a omnidirectional departure. Omnidirectional departure. And this is all, again, it's in the SOPs, right? So if we come to Dubai delivery, omnidirectional 2-14, this is for someone that might not be able to fly for whatever reason, an RNAV procedure, or they have issues with their navigational database. First of all, you have to talk to a tower controller. And at that point, it's pretty much, it says cleared via omnidirectional departure, maintain altitude 4000, squawk, whatever. We have what's called a scratch pad or remark. You can type in whatever you want. In this case, I would type omni. Just whatever you type in there is synchronized to all other controllers. They will see it. At that point, it's a matter of letting everyone else know that, hey, this guy's on an omnidirectional departure. So tower will assign a heading on the takeoff clearance. Departures will start vectoring them. You can put in anything else you'd like in here, for example, whatever it is. Sometimes I've seen call signs that for VAs that might not be mentioned somewhere. Like usually if you left click a call sign, it will tell you what call sign it is. LL. This is Sky Dubai. This is Qatari. You might have some airlines that don't have that in the database. You can just type it in there, like Walker. This is a VA. You can also have other things. If someone has a bad microphone, you can just let other people know that. They can brace their eardrums, whatever. Just make sure once you're done with that plane, get rid of it. Because whatever you put up there, everyone else is going to see it. So be careful, including supervisors. So you would put Omni in the remarks. And same as before, hold position, contact ground, whatever. What if they're not on an IFR flight plan? What if they're VFR? VFR is a bit different. So for VFR, again, it's in the Discord. We use charts for VFR that prescribe certain procedures. So refer to this chart. There's a VFR chart. There are 3 charts. You use all of them in unison. So there's the Dubai CTA VFR, and then there's the Dubai Creek VFR routes. You use them in unison, pretty much, because that's what it says you to do. In here, it says, in this box, see Dubai Aerodrome 2-91. There you go. There's that box right there. This basically shows you the airspace and different routes that you can use to get to various places in unison. So effectively, it would look something like this. If I get rid of that chart, if I put that back in, you can see they are connected. They're meant to be used in unison. So take them. So for VFR, it's a good idea to talk to whoever's above you. If there's a tower controller, talk to tower controller. Maybe tower might be able to help with a route that they would prefer. Maybe the pilot themselves would have their own route preference. Whatever it is, talk to tower, saying, hey, I've got a VFR guy requesting clearance to fly to Abu Dhabi. Tower might say, yep, let's give it to him via Garud Bridge, Victor Romeo 2 Country Club. And the SOP phraseology for how you say these things also changes. I'm not going to cover that here. You can look at that in your own time. VFR does get a little bit more in depth sometimes. It might freak you out. But if you understand how to read this chart, and if you just kind of dig through it, a lot of it will make sense. All we care about is our own airspace. So whatever is in the Dubai airspace, like this, in this blue line, you'll see it here as well. As you can see, this boundary. So whatever is in that airspace, we just cleared to that exit point. That's it. Whatever they do, whatever they want to do after that, we don't give them permission. So in this case, Garud Bridge, Victor Romeo 2 Country Club. They might not exit. They might do traffic patterns, at which point you always do them south of the aerodrome. So if it's 3 zeros in use, left-hand orbits, sorry, left-hand traffic patterns, right-hand for 1-2s. There is an exception to this if you're using jets There's an issue if you keep them south of the airport with how fast a jet goes. There's a big risk that they crash into this thing right here, which is the Burj Khalifa. So for that reason, we do two things. We keep them to the right, and we also keep them a bit higher. In terms of altitude, again, it's all in the SOP, but the airspace goes up to 1,500 feet. The airliners would go to 2,000. So obviously for this, just anytime you get some kind of VFR, talk to someone above you, especially a tower controller or an approach controller. They should be able to help you out. As far as the airliner stuff goes, technically speaking, if you look up here, this is kind of a VATSIM thing really, but as per real life, maximum speed is only 125 knots. So if you're on an airliner trying to do traffic patterns, that's technically illegal because they're never going to be able to do 125 knots even at their max dirty configuration, um, unless they're a very light jet. So, but on VATSIM, you have people that want to do that. So always talk to the tower controller because sometimes they might not even be able to accept VFR. They might be busy with arrivals on IFR, whatever. VFR flight plans can be rejected. Any flight plan can be rejected. In fact, we've just taught you how to reject a flight plan and correct it in the first place. As for VFR, it can be rejected outright. So just talk to a controller above you. So that pretty much covers everything on delivery. We've talked about AORs. We talked about the software. We talked about what to press, what the click dances are. We talked about areas of responsibility, like I said, runway configurations, procedures, what to check for in a flight plan. Once everything's been cleared, how do you say it? If something isn't cleared, what are we actually looking for, and how do we use SimBrief to correct that, and punching it in here. Again, individual sweatbox sessions, you will go through these with your mentor where they give you more individual sort of procedures, such as how do you fix a flight plan? How do you notify the pilot that their flight plan is not correct? How do you notify them? How do you make them refile it, etc., etc.? And then from there, it's straight to ground, hold position, contact ground. Some things to be wary of that's not in the SOP. So we have the even odd rule for altitudes. That goes up all the way to RVSM airspace, after which, so basically to explain this, there was a time in history where each cruising level, so eastbound is 290, there was once a time where you had to have 2,000 feet spacing for the next level. So 29, 31,000 feet. So that's 31, 33. This is what it used to look like. And then in the 1980s to 90s, I believe, I don't remember when, this was brought down to 1,000 feet from 290 to 410 to have increased capacity for air traffic. So that's the one that we all know and use today as 2930, 31, 32, 33, etc. But then that stops at 410. So this is 400 westbound, 410 eastbound, hence the name RVSM, reduced vertical separation minima. Vertical separation minima is 2,000 feet. We've reduced it to 1,000, but above 410, it goes back to 2,000. So now your next westbound is 430. You have to go in 2,000s of feet, 450s. Some planes like business jets or some airliners that cruise really high, you might see them flying at 42,000 feet, flying westbound. That's incorrect. And I believe as well, this plugin does not take into account non-RVSM airspace. So anything up here, if you do it correctly, it might still give you an error message. So obviously this is just a tool meant to help you. You don't have to 100% follow it. If you know you're doing the correct thing, for example, I know for a fact that if someone is flying to Madrid westbound, let's give him a non-RVSM level of, I don't know, 470 for the heck of it. So let's just do 470. That might cause issues. There we go. I know this is correct. You can just put that in there in the remarks. Flight plan okay or something, just to let other pilots know. There's some other things like interacting in text, talking to pilots, again, communicating with pilots, notifying pilots of their flight plans, aliases, PDCs, CPD, not CPDLC, just PDC. There's a difference between both. That stuff can be covered in individual sessions with your mentor, hopefully. So, I mean, at least that's what I do with my students. So, yeah. That pretty much covers all of delivery. And subsequently, as you saw, how to interact with your sector file on Euroscope as a delivery controller. As you can see, it's pretty intuitive. If you know the phraseology as well, you can go left to right. It's a nice order. Call sign, Qatari 1019er, Dubai delivery, clear destination, Hamad, Nabik Tree Foxtrot, maintain altitude 4000, squawk 0521. Let them read it back. Handy dandy. Hold position, contact ground. Obviously, I should have done this as well. And that's it. So that's delivery, pretty much. Next is ground. I'm going to take a 5-minute break, if that's okay. I probably think everyone else could use a 5-minute break as well. We could benefit from that. In that break, if anyone has any questions from what I've covered thus far, again, I understand the recording has been pretty big by this point, and we've only just finished delivery. But again, this is meant to be a comprehensive guide. So, yeah, if anyone has questions or if someone's awake, you can let me know. I will take a 5-minute break, and I will take that time to answer questions. In the meantime, I'm going to communicate with another student of mine that I was scheduled to have a mentoring session with, but I shall have to postpone that. In case anyone has questions, please let me know. More interesting because planes actually start to move in this case. So, like I said, your layout. I've got my departure list. I've got an arrival window. This allows me to assign stands. And I have an alerts box. This is also important. So here's what I'll do. I will just leave this guy paused for the minute. I'll pause this guy. Just play the session. There's going to be another guy coming in. And once he does, I'll just have him paused as well. While we wait, let's come back to the whiteboard. Let's get rid of all the stuff we don't need. No longer need SimBrief. I don't need SkyVector. I don't need this. I don't need that. That's done. That's done. Coming back to this. Okay. Review once again. AORs. We've got two different AORs. Sorry, we've got two different controllers, ground 1 and ground 2. Ground 1 controls, again, I'm just going to speed through it now. We got different aprons, different aircraft park in different aprons. So just a brief overview on that as well. So airliners can park here, 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 sometimes here across this entire apron. Emirates is technically approved to park anywhere they want, but primarily you see them in this area here or in ground 1's area. You might see them here sometimes. International flights like British Airways, Lufthansa, whatever, would usually park in this concourse. Cargo can park here. There are remote stands, as you can see. This is a cargo apron. There's also a DHL up here. Somewhere here, I believe. So you might see DHL, you might see some cargo planes or FedExes. There's a FedEx in this case. I presume that's FedEx. There he is, yep. They might park up there as well. You might see some low-cost operators like iFly, Express India, I believe NAS Express as well, if I'm not mistaken. And again, we have a stand assignment tool that will automatically, if I just left-click auto, it will give them a stand. Echo 17 in this case. I can do it again. It cycled to Echo 3. If I would like to manually assign a stand, I could do that. Manual. I can just type in whatever I want. So yeah. That's why I have the arrival window open. So that's where everyone parks. Right. Ground 1 can control ground 2 areas if ground 2 is not online. So if ground 2 is not online, as someone just pointed out, no vice versa. If ground 2 is not online, ground 1 controls everything. If ground 1 is online, ground 2 is not online, delivery is not online, ground 1 also does delivery. It's just VATSIM, basically, where you do top-down. So for you to be able to connect as ground 2, there needs to be a ground 1. In fact, this is also in the SOP as well. I'm just going to go through the chapters really quickly. I remember seeing this. If we look at splitting procedures for ground, splitting procedure 3-25. So, when there's only one ground movement controller online, they shall cover all surface movements, unless otherwise authorized by staff. If you want to connect as ground 2, when there's ground 1, there must be at least Dubai delivery before 2 ground controllers out. So basically you need ground 1 and delivery to be online if you can connect as ground 2, unless authorized by UAE staff. When delivery is not online, ground movement control shall assume the responsibility of the lower controller. So you do top down. You do delivery plus ground, pretty much. So that's your splitting procedure. Right, let's talk about ground movements. So once again, we're talking about the 3 zeros configuration, and we now come to using this diagram right here. This is the standard taxi routes. They're always going to be different. Single runways. Sorry, let's come up here. There we go. Right. So as it says up here, blue lines for departures, yellow lines for arrivals. You see some commonly used intermediate holding points. I'll talk about that. And we have crossover points. So, a quick tour of the airport. So, we've got the runways. We've got some parallel taxiways. We've got Papa going all the way end to end, like this. We've got November, end to end. Again, you can get used to this layout if you just observe or if you just study the charts. You've got Mike, goes end to end. We've got Kilo, we've got Zulu, Uniform, Yankee. You've got vertical taxiways. We've got Zulu 1, Lima 1, Juliet 1, Yankee, Lima 3, Lima 4. There's a Lima 1 here. There was formerly a Lima 2 that's been converted to a storage facility now. I believe a fire station as well, if I'm not mistaken. Lima 3, Lima 4, Juliet 1, Yankee, Whiskey, Juliet 2, Juliet 3, Juliet 4, Juliet 5. We've got some other taxiways here. Victor. We've got Romeo 1, Romeo. And we also have crossovers. So we have in here Papa 1, Papa 2, Papa 2 Alpha, Papa 3, Papa 4. These are technically they're taxiways in this case. However, down here we do have proper crossovers. We have Zulu 6, Zulu 7. They're crossovers if you want to cross people around. Notice here as well, we also have crossovers or taxiways, as you could see, with the same name as holding points. So we've got holding point Kilo 1, holding point Kilo 2. This is taxiway Kilo 1. So Zulu, Kilo 1, Kilo. I just treat this as a crossover just to remove ambiguity. So Zulu crossover Kilo 1, Kilo. If I had to do that. Zulu crossover Kilo 1, Kilo. Zulu crossover. Again, as far as when to use crossovers, where to taxi, we'll dive into that. Lastly, you have stuff in blue, intermediate holding points. Along the taxiway, you have Kilo Kilo, Kilo Lima, Kilo Mike, Kilo Juliet, Uniform Bravo, each places where aircraft can be instructed to hold. You have runway holding points. And that about does it for the airport tour. You will be doing your job in this position right here. This is where the tower sits. And yeah, that's that. So, techniques as far as ground is concerned. So let's start with pushbacks. Again, I'm not going to dive into phraseology. I've explained that once as to why you should stick to the standards. I'm just going to deliver phraseology the way it's being delivered, or it's meant to be delivered. So, right, let's start with pushbacks, because that's where we left off as delivery. A pushback is a maneuver where an aircraft will obviously push backwards with a tug, whichever direction they face. They finish one stand abeam. A beam basically means this, right? So if they're facing a certain direction, to their left, a beam, it's Foxtrot 10, a beam Foxtrot 10. A standard pushback will look something like this or something like this. One stand a beam, usually. You could also do a short pushback, which will look something like this. It will pivot in the opposite direction a bit to create maneuvering space to execute a tight turn that puts you a beam your current stand. So that's a short pushback. You also have a long pushback, so anything longer than the standard of one stand. It could go like this, it could keep going if you want to. For the sake of it, let's just bring him here. This is now a long pushback. So when to use what? We'll talk about that. Which direction? We'll talk about that. Right, so we study this diagram. This will tell you where to send aircraft based on where they are. So if I have a pushback from here, these blue arrows all pointing in that direction means that I have to push back aircraft in that direction, like this. Facing west. That is facing west. This is facing east. Sorry. So that's east, up north in the Papa Gates as well. We have facing east. Facing north up here. Facing south down here. So yeah, essentially just follow the arrows if you're departing aircraft. If you're arriving aircraft, keep them on the arrival taxiways. More importantly, just as important actually, stick to your AOR, stick to your area of responsibility. So if I'm ground one and if I've got an arriving aircraft, don't expect them to be on your frequency when they're here. Why? Because that's not in your area of responsibility. Tower assumes that area. And there's a reason for that. I'm not going to go through that here. So if they're here and you're like, hey, why isn't he not on my frequency? Don't send them contact me's. Don't bug Tower. Don't do any of that. Tower will instruct a continue taxi instruction to ensure continuous vacate once the aircraft lands so that the other aircraft can land and vacate as well. And they will clear to Kilo Mike for one of these stands, Kilo Lima to one of these stands, Kilo Kilo, and that's as far as the AOR goes. Kilo Kilo. So from here, let's say someone's taxiing to stand Charlie something, and there's a ground 2 on, you cannot do that. You have to respect your AOR. So keep them inside your AOR. You cannot, if you're arriving aircraft like this, you can't just taxi them straight to the stand because this is not in your area. You do not know what's happening here. There might be a guy pushing back. This could be bad. So make sure you don't do that. Stick to your AOR. Stick to standard taxi routes. Next, as far as technique. So based off of this, you basically assign a runway holding point for departure. Based off of that, you follow the taxi directions. So in this case, if they're over here, taxi via Zulu, Kilo, Mike 13 Alpha, runway holding point Mike 13 Alpha, runway 30 right. So it's just a matter of saying it to the pilot. But it's not so simple because as a controller, you have to ensure separation and you have to sequence planes. Let me give you a story. So let's assume there's a guy here on Zulu, and let's assume there's a guy here on uniform. And let's draw a hypothetical finish line, right? This finish line, like right here. I want to see who's going to reach this line first. It kind of makes sense from this picture to assume it might be this guy, going by taxi directions, taking them to their holding point, Mike 13 Alpha. It might make sense to, if you just draw that out and then continue like that, versus this guy that has to cover all that extra distance. Hypothetically, yeah, sure. It's going to take a while for him to get here. So we have two of them. So again, the instruction would be Zulu, Lima 4, Mike, holding point, Mike 13 Alpha, runway 30 right. Uniform, Yankee, right Kilo, left Lima 4, right Mike, holding point, Mike 13 Alpha, runway 30 right. Oh, look, they're both using the same taxiways from here. But hey, no problem, because this guy is in front of the other guy. He has less distance to cover. Hopefully they don't crash into each other. This is a bad practice. Suhaib, hello, welcome. I'm covering ground. This is bad practice. In fact, it's terrible practice because this assumes that everyone is going to commence taxi at an equal time and with equal familiarity with the airport. 95% of the time, that's not the case on VATSIM. Let me add some more context to this story. So assuming that this guy you think should get here first, let me now tell you that he is on his first ever VATSIM flight. And this guy is a real-world ATPL pilot who's converted his experience in real life onto VATSIM just to keep his skills in check. He knows what charts to open. He reads the airport briefings. He briefed himself on the departure procedure, on the expected taxi routes. He might even be a controller in this airport, like I am. He might know what to do. This guy's on his first VATSIM flight, realizes that he forgot to have his charts open, tries to open charts, realizes he forgot to open Navigraph or sign into Navigraph, etc. And hunts for the chart. And by the time he starts rolling, Mr. Orange down here has already made it well into his taxi route. By the time Blue gets going, all of a sudden, you have a conflict. And now you have to come here and see this happening, where they're both on the same taxiway as far as their instructions are concerned, and you see this happening. Hey, you stop, give way, or you stop, give way, whoever. This is bad. This is terrible because this is just two airplanes. All it just takes, now sure, here we have like 10 airplanes, but it doesn't even need that much. All it takes, I'm going to do a little bit more. One arriving aircraft, and maybe one departing aircraft from here. So that's a total of 4 planes. This alone is enough to overwhelm a controller that does what I just described, where they sit and wait for things to happen, and suddenly, hey, you give way to this guy, you give way to that guy. You sit here and babysit. This is terrible, because you are wasting all your precious resources and brain power fixating on things waiting to happen when you could use that time more efficiently. And that's called being proactive. How do you do it? I want to come up with a route that takes into account what I just said. Let's just assume, once again, coming back to that story, I have no idea when he's going to get there. I have no idea when he's going to get there. So regardless of which, I don't want them to crash into each other. How do I do that? Zulu, hold Zulu Foxtrot. Uniform, Yankee, hold Yankee Alpha. Now I could literally go take a piss. I could go grab water. I could look at the SOP. I could talk to a friend on my Discord, whatever. Worst case scenario, I come back way too late. They still haven't crashed into each other. They're just there shouting on the radio, hey, I'd like to continue taxi. But they haven't crashed into each other. That's the key thing here. We could do even better than this. And we could use that trick into pushbacks as well. So now, at this point, I want to tell this guy to turn right, and I want to tell this guy. So, for example, let's do it like this. So now it's a different story. So we've got Orange here waiting, and let's say there's a yellow guy arriving into the gate, holding Kilo Foxtrot. Obviously, I intend to send him like this, as per the standard taxi routes, to Mike 13 Alpha. But I can't, as per this rule that I've just made, I can't overlap someone else's taxi path. But now the problem becomes, hey, I really have to sit and wait and see when this guy crosses. I have to observe, sit and wait here. Could I not use that time to instruct other planes to taxi around? Could I not fix a flight plan? Could I not do something else? Yes, you can. And this is where we get to conditional clearances. So you can give this guy the condition, like, hey, all right, you can do this, provided, here's the condition now. The condition is that this yellow guy has to cross right to left, from his right to left. So in terms of phraseology, that would sound like behind the Lufthansa A340 passing right to left kilo, continue Yankee right kilo, left Lima 4, hold Lima 4 Alpha, whatever. Behind, let them read it back. Guess what? You can do the exact same thing for pushbacks as well. So what happens when, so I'm going to come back to pushbacks for a moment. What happens if I have a guy here requesting pushback and I have a guy here cleared to taxi Zulu, hold Zulu Foxtrot? First of all, it's a bad idea to make the orange guy wait. Make him wait for a pushback. That's a bad idea. You always want to keep the apron moving. The longer you keep planes stationary on an apron, the worse it gets because that clogs up the airport. You can obviously be a little bit more proactive. You can think about maybe before even, if you think this guy's going to do a pushback, which a good sign that someone's going to do a pushback is what you see here. He is squawking the code. This guy isn't. So if I have a guy taxiing like this, I would start to think, hey, you know what? I feel like this guy might request pushback. Or maybe this guy might request pushback. Let's try this guy instead. So long before that pushback is even called, take that into account. Try doing something like this. But again, be careful. Are you allowed to cross into that? Well, respect your AORs. You cannot do them east of Kilo Kilo. So I cannot cross over via Kilo 4, Kilo 3, or Zulu 9. I can use Kilo 2. In addition to that, also be wary of arriving aircraft. So this is where we come to right of way. So arriving aircraft have the right of way always. They're the priority. Arrivals are the priority first. Second, when it comes to sequencing departures, so let's just recreate that junction right there. You must be familiar with nav lights on an aircraft. Someone could just remind me of that, where each light goes where. Red, green, and white. Particularly red and green. That's what I care about right now. If someone could remember. Suhaib is, well, yeah, they go on the wings, yes, but where on the wings? Okay, someone said green right, red left. That is correct. Okay. Red left, green right. Let's do red left, green right. So the rules of right away says that if you're a pilot and if the first thing you see is a green nav light, this is the closer thing that you see, the closest thing to you is a green nav light, you have right of way. You can continue, this guy has to wait, and then continue later. How do you know this works? Well, think of the opposite. This guy, the first thing he's going to see closest to him is a red light. What happens when I change position? Maybe something like this instead. You can see now this guy has right of way. So based off of that, try and be intuitive if you can. Prioritize arrival aircraft, then use right of way, or even just common sense, really. If someone gets to, so if I gave someone Zulu Foxtrot, if I gave someone Yankee Alpha, Zulu Foxtrot guy got there first. Okay, fair enough. That's also fine. But we're talking about conditional clearances, right? I was trying to say that you can be conditional with pushbacks as well. So if someone's been cleared Zulu Foxtrot, I can instruct this guy a conditional clearance of, hey, behind the Emirates 777 passing left to right Zulu, pushback approved, face west Zulu, behind. Again, left to right, left to right. This looks like a right to left, but again, think of the pilot from his left to his right. So when you use conditional clearances, when you're proactive with both pushbacks, taxis, and you're using your intermediate holding points, you will never have conflicts. You will never run into issues. You'll never be overwhelmed. It's just a matter of keeping things in check. Always remember what you're doing. And the other thing as well is to update tags. So let's just make this guy push back for the heck of it. So I'm going to play the sweatbox session here. Let's ask this guy to push back. I'm going to do that right now. So push back. I'm going to increase the simulation rate to 8 times. Likewise, if you have people parked next to each other for simultaneous pushbacks, the SOP says as long as there's 2 stands of separation between them by the time they finish their pushback, so if they're like this, let's say there's a guy here and there's this guy, by the time they finish, if there remains 2 stands of separation, so this is one stand, this is another stand, you now can do a simultaneous pushback. So how do you execute this maneuver? That's where, once again, like I said, you have the short pushback, you have the long pushback, and there's phraseologies to each. It's in the SOP. Basically, short pushback approved, face west Zulu to finish a beam stand Foxtrot 6. Long pushback approved, face west Zulu to finish a beam stand Foxtrot 9er. On VATSIM, I would recommend especially the long pushback guys. Short pushback guys, less so, because they could also do a straight pushback that accomplishes the same thing. For long pushbacks, always ask the pilot first, are you able long pushback? They might not be able to do it. If that's the case, downgrade to a conditional clearance, such as, so this guy now has to wait. He can't do a long pushback, so the other one's going to do his pushback. And then once he's starting his taxi, or you could just tell this guy, once this guy's done taxiing, so behind Emirates 777, taxiing left to right, pushback approved, face west, Zulu, behind, whatever. So again, you'll see all examples of phraseology in your SOP. So if you apply these techniques, if you're being careful, if you're not sending planes over each other's pathing, so if you have something like this going on with an arriving aircraft and you don't do this, instead you do this to leave room for this, so that once this guy comes in, be conditional with this guy to be able to do that. If you can't do that, then do this. Now green's pushback has to be conditional. Once everybody gets here, be conditional again. So be conditional, be proactive. Don't just react last minute. That's not going to help. All it takes is for 4 planes to do something, at which point you're just sitting there doing babysitting. 4 planes is enough to get the worst sort of situations and scenarios to happen. Just ignore these for now, because I kept the simulation rate running, and it was quite high. Just going to get rid of them, because they're arriving aircraft. All right, so Lufthansa has just finished its pushback. I'm going to set the simulation rate back to normal. And let's just say, for the heck of it, I'm giving this guy a long pushback. Right? So let's say he's going to continue his pushback a bit further back. I want you to pay attention to something. I'm going to bring this alert box into view. Look at this, no pushback clearance. Because I haven't updated the status of Lufthansa 631, I have to set this to push and start. That disappears. This is synchronized with every other controller. They will see this. If I'm a tower controller, if I see something here, I will assume 2 things. 1, ground didn't give that clearance to this guy. 2, ground is not updating the tags. Either way, it looks unprofessional. And again, you do it through the STS menu up here. You could also do it on the call sign over here. Left click the call sign. Do this. Push and start. This applies to taxi, to line up and wait for tower controllers on the runway. You will all get an alert if it says no takeoff clearance, runway incursion, whatever. So yeah, you have to respect sort of tag discipline. That's what comes down to tag discipline now. If you're giving something to somebody, Lufthansa 631, Lufthansa 631, why is it not working? Oh, he's still pushing back. Hang on, let's just hold position. Okay. It's not letting me do this for some reason. There we go. Okay. Lufthansa 631 taxi Zulu, hold Zulu Foxtrot. And he reads it back immediately. Set it to taxi. Otherwise, it will shout at you, and everyone else will see it. And in addition to that, you also have a hold short column. This reminds you where you can add it. Add Zulu Foxtrot. So if at any point you see someone's not where they're, you think, hey, did I really clear him to that? You can look up here and you realize, oh, he's just missed it. So keep your tag discipline. Use whatever tools you can. So it reminds you, again, worst case scenario, you leave, you come back, you forgot what everyone's doing. Obviously, if you follow the correct rules, no one's going to crash into each other. But to build back your situational awareness, to maintain your situational awareness, use things like this. All of a sudden, let's say, all right, continue via Lima 4, hold Lima 4 alpha. So let's give them that taxi instruction, Lima 4, hold Lima 4 alpha. So I'm splitting up my taxi, even when it's quiet. This should encourage you. And there's another reason why splitting up taxis like this is nicer, because it simplifies your transmissions as well. If I had to say taxi via, let's say it's a dead airport. Let's not get rid of Lufthansa. Let's assume he doesn't even exist. Let's assume nobody exists. Everyone's dead. There's just one guy down here. If I say taxi, uniform, Yankee, Kilo, Lima 4, Mike, holding point, Mike 1, that's a lot to say. You might confuse yourself. The pilot might confuse himself. You might confuse each other. Therefore, keep things simple. Stick to threes. I find that 3 is a good place to stop most of the time. And things would naturally stop at 3 as well. Are you expected? Well, yeah, obviously you can review it. It's a recorded session. So you can review it. You can look at the SOP. So yeah, Rahman's asking, a way I like to think of this is it's like you're playing with your toy trains, but it's planes. Kind of, yeah. So, I guess that works. That reminds me, this rule that we've just established here, that no one's allowed to overlap on the other taxi instruction, we call it the red carpet rule. If you know what a red carpet is, obviously in theatricals and whatnot, like it's very bespoke to a unique individual. This is his red carpet. No one else is allowed to go onto his carpet. So respect the red carpet rule is something I might say to my students, and that's what that means. How long is left? We're pretty much done. Just talking about runway crossovers, and that's it. Runway crossovers and holding points. But yeah, so keep things simple. I find that doing 3 sets of information is pretty easy. So taxi, uniform, Yankee, hold, Yankee Alpha. So that's 1, 2, 3. Uniform, Yankee, hold, Yankee Alpha. Continue via Yankee, right Kilo, left Lima 4, hold Lima 4 Alpha. You can see also in the taxi diagrams common holding, intermediate holding points. Intermediate holding points you say as hold. Actual runway holding points you say as holding point. Holding point Kilo 1. Hold Zulu Foxtrot, etc. When it comes to your arriving aircraft, if they have to park up here, you send them to holding point Mike 2. That's the standard cross up there. So when it comes to departing aircraft, you have quite a few options. So every red holding point is the holding point that you can use. However, if you look closely, you'll notice that the arrows only go to a certain one. This comes down to what's known as preferred crossovers, or preferred crossing points, or standard crossing points. I'm just going to search it in this document here. If not, I'm just going to go up to, let's go to Dubai ground departure procedures, dual runway 30, and again, everything I've just said, again, this answers the question for Laith. It's all in here. So based off of the information I've told you, play it side by side, see what happens. So arrival taxi, we're going to go to departure taxi procedures to departure runway 30 right, 3-20. As you could see, this section right here, aircraft on these aprons, so basically going via this one, holding point Kilo 14, and then during periods of lower aerodrome activity, 1-1 or 1-2 may be used, provided you get coordination with AIR. So that basically means always send them to Kilo 14. If you want to use Kilo 11, ask tower or ask whoever's above you. Reason being, it's going to be very busy up here on Mike. It's probably going to be very busy here on the arrival runway as well. Having someone hold there is inefficient because only one aircraft can hold. So if you look sort of here, I guess, I'll come to the tower view, or the tower. If there's an aircraft holding short Mike 13 Alpha, you cannot have another one like this. This is not allowed. Likewise, you cannot have another aircraft shimmying around like this. This is also not allowed. So if you have an aircraft holding short Mike 14 Alpha, which you will have if it's a busy, busy day, tower will be assigning different holding points as per tactical use. Holding a guy here when there's a bunch of traffic over here is just not, it's useless. So Kilo 14 is standard to make them come in like this. So, yeah. As for the arrivals that want to park up north, same thing. Mike 2, you can use Mike 5 Alpha if you need to as well. Just don't forget to hand off to tower. And that finally brings us to handoffs. Over here, tower 1, over here, tower 2. Keep it nice and early. That's why the diagram is in such a way where anywhere you see a stripe in a color, like this, that is your reminder. So in Lima 3 to Lima 4, that's your reminder, hey, I should think about the handoff. That's what the stripe means. So I make a right turn. Once they're established on Mike, all right, contact tower on 118.750, same thing here. Once they're coming up to Kilo 14, they're coming up like this, all right, contact tower on 119.550. So again, you have a lot to think about as a ground controller. You have to think about your areas of responsibilities. You have to think about the other guys above you, handoffs, pushbacks, taxis. Of course, if you're just doing ground and no delivery, there's a lot to do. So that's why, like I said, you have to be proactive and you have to use the correct techniques. It will very much reward you, and that's how you'll be efficient. So that concludes ground. That's about as concise as I can make ground. That applies to everyone. And then obviously for Sweatbox, it would be more on an individual case-by-case basis to focus more on phraseology or focus more on whatever it takes that a guy needs more focus on. But at the end of the day, as far as theory is concerned, this is everything. So obviously the other stuff as well. Tag management, it's synchronized with all the other controllers. It alerts other controllers if someone's doing something that isn't what they're supposed to be doing. If I'm a tower controller and if I see aircraft on my alert screen for pushback, no pushback clearance, no taxi clearance, I will just assume more than pilots not, pilots doing something not assigned to them. I will actually think it's the controller being overloaded because I see that happen sometimes. When a controller gets really tunnel visioned and things start to happen, they just don't have the brain power to keep up doing tasks. So that's what I said. Always stay on top of the game, and that's what Sweatbox is for. It's for you to practice, which is usually done individual. Red color mean on uniform, it's in the taxi diagrams as well, but basically means it's not fit for use for the A380 and the 747-8. You'll see this here. With a red background, not code F capable. So that's the uniform, Yankee, Whiskey, as well as this one right here. This is Quebec, if I'm not wrong. Yep, Quebec. For arriving aircraft, also assign stands, auto. It should do it automatically. You might not be able to do it. You might try and click on it, nothing happens. Just wait for arriving aircraft to be within 10 miles from the localizer. Because the chances are that the reason you can't do that is because the tag is still assumed by the approach controller. Once they release it to tower, that's when we can do this. So keep that up to date as well. Again, this can be found in this window. Lists, arrival lists. Alerts is this box. Should always be open. You can also have stands open if you want. I've seen some people use this, but it's a lot to scroll, so I don't use this sometimes. But if it's quiet, sure, I guess. But yeah, this is usually what my workflow looks like as a ground controller. Use hold short, build your own situational awareness, stay on top of the game, tag management, and respect the red carpet rule. Be proactive. Use conditional clearances. Use simultaneous pushbacks wherever you can so that the airport doesn't slow down. Because if you just say, okay, hold position, and then you sit there and wait for a guy to cross. You're slowing things down. You're slowing things down when people could easily be crossing out. It's the difference between being able to get out, um, I would say, 6 aircraft in the span of 5 minutes versus only 2 aircraft in the span of 5 minutes. So, if there's no station above us, can we look at the approach and see if there are any aircraft on final and then tell them to cross accordingly without putting them on Unicom? Technically, that's outside your AOR. What I would usually do is, for crossing, monitor Unicom 122.8, contact me once you've crossed the runway. So yeah, that's just to keep things safe. Any other questions? I'd like to shut down this seminar by this stage. It's getting quite late. And I'll also stop streaming as well. As for the whiteboard, I tell you that sorry, for the whiteboard, I did send a link. Not sure if it was accessible or not. Was my whiteboard accessible though? Like, could you open it?